What's going on, gang? Coach Joe here, chiming in on this edition of our Friday Shorts. Have a really great topic, one I often get, as a guy who has CrossFit experience and has transitioned into weightlifting. I'm always getting asked my opinion on the topic of high rep Oli lifts in CrossFit, cycling of the snatch and clean and jerk in CrossFit, and in general, kind of the different motor patterns that come about because of the time demands and working for time and having to move quickly in the CrossFit setting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we do, I really quick wanted to mention to you guys, head over to docandjock.com. You notice the website's finally overhauled and changed. Thank you, Johnny Barbell, John Bouchard. You're a good guy. We appreciate your help in that regard with the logo and everything. But also, guys, as a free gift, Dr. Danny and I have put our heads together. One of the concepts of this show is to combine the experience of a world-class practitioner in that of a physical therapist, Dr. Danny, and a moderate to okay strength coach, myself here. So what we've done is we've combined our expertise here to think about a mobility overhaul. Whether it's me as a weightlifter or Dr. Danny as a practitioner, we're always getting mobility questions from healthy people, hurt people. How do I mobilize better? Mobility is a hot topic. We got a lot of great resources from Mobility WOD. Check out Mobility WOD Pro. But also, guys, if you want something more than that, maybe a structured plan, Dr. Danny and I have put our heads together and developed one. It's a week overhaul. Roll through it. We attack things by region. We provide some stability exercises. It's a really great tool for not only gaining new mobility, but giving you a few drills to own that real estate. So mobilizing is one thing, but if you're not stabilizing in those positions, gang, you're just renting that real estate. So check that out. And guys, if you do like that, along with the free 7-day overhaul, you get 2 months. You'll get a coupon code for 2 months free at Mobility WOD Pro. Pretty cool. It's a cost of a Netflix subscription. That's pretty cheap, but hey, if you're like me with 3 kids, starving, every little bit helps, and we're doing our best to share our super friendships with you guys. So on to the topic of the day. We're discussing cycling, the weightlifting movements. Specifically, we're going to talk about the snatch. So we've written about this on the Joe's Barbell blog. Go over there, check out www.joesbarbell.com, and look up a blog post called Fatigue Makes Cowards of Us All, where I discuss cycling technique for the snatch. So in the post, I show a video of an online athlete I work with, Brandon, and he's kind of working through Isabel. And the first few reps, he's cycling, banging away. Technique is decent, but you'll notice when the video cuts and we go to the last few reps, he's dropping the bar, form changing, he's moving slower. The point of the post is these factors are not independent of one another. We are moving slower because form breaks down, and form breaks down when we start moving slow, some things like that. So when we get tired, we just don't move as well. And this happens for a lot of reasons. But what we can do, in my mind, if we are going to start cycling reps in the snatch, clean, and jerk, you can do a few things from the beginning to practice efficiency. And the main one we talk about in the post, we limit 3. We talk about 3. And the first one, guys, what we can do is utilize the legs. You want to utilize the legs early. The legs should be the big movers. The legs should be the engine behind big movement. A lot is made of the hips. The hips should be the chassis. The hips should be the frame of the car that supports everything, in my mind. And the hips should be the focus of any structural integrity. And honestly, we want to think about holding water with those hips. But the better our mobility is in the hip region, the better our hips function and the better our hips can hold water, the more the legs can actually drive and move the barbell. And that's ultimately what we want. So utilize the legs early. You'll see in the video, Brandon isn't doing this, and you can see it through his setup. So early on, even when he's cycling for good speed, he's got the high hip, kind of low chest starting position that I think is a common mistake most CrossFitters make at the expense of speed and getting more reps. Now, with Isabel, you're working with 135 pounds. In other CrossFit workouts, you're going to work with maybe as little as 75 pounds, which we've seen in the open a few times. So again, load is going to determine maybe the start and how fast, and the reps matter too. Doing 30 reps for time at 135 is different than doing 5 reps at 75 pounds, 15 reps at 75 pounds, so on and so forth. So what I would suggest, regardless of that, you have to practice. So, you should be doing some interval work, maybe build up sets, 5 touch and go reps for time, seeing how that works. But in a general sense, you want to set yourself in a position where you are utilizing the legs. And you can see this where the hips come up and the chest is down. That's going to put more of the emphasis on the back to move the load. We never want that. So save, gang, that high hip start for maybe if you're doing something like Isabel or you're in a competition setting. That should be the sprint to the finish. When it comes to CrossFit, I love the sport of fitness in the sense that, everyone has the right to do it. But in practice, guys, you should always practice mechanics correctly. And I don't like to put my athletes into that high hip, kind of rounded back, get a rep at all costs in practice. If you're getting hurt in the gym, if you're getting hurt within your strength and conditioning program, that's no bueno. So utilize the legs early. So what I'm always going to advocate is kind of a setup that's going to look similar to your Ole setup, and depending on load, you can maybe get those hips a little bit higher. But going to that high hip start early doesn't end up very well. So sacrificing speed in practice, guys, is never an option, and to me, it's going to lead to injury down the road. If you want to build strength in that position, maybe doing some RDLs can help you, but don't do that early on in your cycling progressions. Save that for the place to go and finish when you're in that competitive environment. The next one, guys, is you want to prioritize foot placement. If you watch this video, Brandon is jumping and flipping his feet out. He's also, as he gets tired, rotating and moving to the right, left, forward, backwards. He's moving all over the place. Guys, when you're in your practice setting, you want to prioritize foot placement. So wherever you feel comfortable, whether you keep your legs tight to utilize leg drive or you widen your base to promote stability, you want your foot movement when you're cycling to move as little as possible. Foot movement's going to show us a couple things. One, if we're moving the feet from hips to shoulders or hips to wider, that's going to slow your transition time. We know this, that's obvious, because you're going to bring your feet back in to get back into the movement. But also, if you're jumping back, jumping forward, and if you're rotating, it's a sign that you're displaying force in that direction. For the snatch, clean, and jerk, the only movement, or the only place we should be displacing energy and force is up and down. You drive through you attack the floor with your feet up, and then you pull your body down. That's it. Any movement from the feet going in any other direction is a sign of a power dump. We're just not being efficient. So prioritize foot movement and foot placement in your practice. Tinker with it. I don't know if you're going to be faster with a tighter foot placement or a wider foot placement. I'm not sure, but I do know you're going to be faster if you don't move those feet. And again, just like the high hip start or the low hip start, this is going to be determined by load and practice. So prioritize foot placement and take it under account as part of your practice. If you have 5 sets of, I always would say if you want to practice your cycling, do an EMOM, 5 sets of 5, build up from 75 pounds to maybe 75%, something like that. Manageable loads, and see what you can do faster and train that up. And then lastly, guys, pull under. You can see in the beginning of this video, Brandon, at the very beginning, is catching these things in a high power. And eventually that high power reception becomes a press out. The body's going to want to put the bar where it's used to putting it, right? And we want to hit standards. I obviously agree with that, but we don't want to do it at the expense of the smaller muscle groups. When we're snatching, you shouldn't press out. It's just not efficient. Maybe, again, those couple reps for time at the end, we can sprint to the finish and advocate some slip and form in a competition setting, but not in practice. So pull under. If you focus on pulling your body under the bar, maybe 3 to 6 inches deeper, you're going to utilize the legs more, and the legs are going to stay in the game a lot longer than the shoulders and arms. So start pulling under early. So again, a common mistake is to just power everything and catch it really high. But that high reception comes at a cost. One, the legs have to work harder to get the bar higher, and the arms have to work harder, as you can see in Brandon, to get the bar higher. And we want to avoid pressing out at all costs, especially in practice. So I can remember my first experience, my second experience working through the Snatch double under workout. I actually did it at Carolina CrossFit with a gentleman named Paul Beckwith. And if anyone knows Paul Beckwith, he is a huge man. And no doubt, for as big of a man as Paul is, he can move great. Paul's got great double unders, decent gymnastics. I've actually, to this day, I have to give Paul a lot of credit. I've never seen a man so big do such great muscle ups. And if you've ever seen the rig at Carolina CrossFit, it is a monster rig. It's huge. It takes up a good portion of the 10,000 square foot facility in the front of that gym. So it's a monster, and Paul's a monster. But in Paul snatches, and he did at that time more than I did. But when we did that workout together, I actually beat him in that score because in the beginning of that workout, I went to a power snatch variation very, very, very early, caught the bar at about 6-inch reception depth, and squatted it up to a lockout, where Paul went to a high hip muscle snatch very early and kind of frantic pound the floor reps, and he didn't last very long. So again, this is something that does take practice. This is where you need to be doing your interval work. Again, 5 sets of 5 EMOM every 90 seconds. Ascending weight will give you an indicator of what you can handle, how you can handle it, and how you should receive the bar. So practice makes perfect, guys. And, practice does not make perfect practice. Perfect practice does, so keep that in mind. So a couple tips for you guys if you're getting into some cycling, just to kind of sum this up. Regardless of if you're cleaning, snatching, or jerking, 3 tips that I think will instantly improve your cycling times in the weightlifting movements in a CrossFit setting are utilizing the legs, prioritizing foot placement, and pulling under early. One of the reasons I wanted to hit this topic was we were just coming fresh off the games, and, we all cruise social media, we all cruise Instagram, and, weightlifting folks on the Instagram were trashing Josh Bridges' clean attempt in that clean speed ladder, where it kind of went down to his elbows, and he kind of Jefferson curled it up to his front rack and made the lift. A lot of weightlifting coaches and purists will vomit when they see movement like that, and to be honest, it's not any way that I would teach a weightlifter to perform a clean. But here's the problem there. Josh Bridges was not in a weightlifting meet. Josh Bridges was not practicing weightlifting in that setting. Josh Bridges was trying to win the CrossFit Games, right? He's put a lot of time in to practicing. He's obviously a strong guy who's trained his body and does the recovery methods, and he has people around him to help him. Josh and I share some similarities. I'm pretty sure he still works with CJ Martin, but I could be wrong in that, and I apologize if I do. But when I was working with CrossFit 808, we did go over to CrossFit Invictus, and I did have the opportunity to train with Josh Bridges. And I know CJ implements a lot of fine folks around his team and his athletes, so I know they're getting good care. So Josh has every right to do whatever it takes to hit those reps, especially in that setting. Let's also not forget the fact that there's a big payday for winning the CrossFit Games, not only in the check that you get for winning it, but also endorsement opportunities and whatnot. So in the same sense that I'll let an NFL player beat his head against the wall on Sunday, I'm going to allow a CrossFit athlete to practice or compete with less than desirable form if they've put in the time and there's the payday worth at the end. But I also, on that flip side, mom walking into the CrossFit gym day 2 should not be cleaning and jerking with form like that, they haven't earned the right. They probably haven't put in the time to build that base to go at it that hard. So just food for thought when we discuss weightlifting and CrossFit and cycling the reps. There are opportunities and ways to have a middle ground. There are opportunities and ways to practice cycling. And there are opportunities and ways, guys, where you can allow form to digress to complete a task. That might be winning in competition. That may be if you're in an opportunity where there is a life or death circumstance, sure. But guys, those circumstances never ever come up in the gym in day to day. Guys, if your strength and conditioning program is hurting you, it's not a very good strength and conditioning program. So food for thought, guys, from Coach Joe. Hope this helps. I've been there. I've competed in weightlifting, competed in the CrossFit Games, and I've trained folks and with folks who have done both and not at all. So food for thought, guys. We got a lot of great things going on Doc and Jock podcast. Again, we've mentioned the 7-day mobility overhaul with the Mobility WOD coupon, but also, guys, some great show sponsors in the form of Shoe, Q, and Performa Sleep. Check out their pages. I know at least with ShoeQ, we have a discount code opportunity. Enter the code JOCK10 for 10% off. Guys, ShoeQ is cool. I don't run, but when I do, I run with my ShoeQs, and I've actually even been lifting with them as well. If you follow some of my posting, I'm a big advocate of mid-foot activation in weightlifting, kind of a forefoot to mid-foot approach to it, and I've used mats to do it, to get my heels off, but don't have to utilize those mats with the ShoeQ. You get some instant tactile feedback, so check that out. And also, guys, Performance Sleep's mattress is bueno. Been on it for, I think, going on 6 months now, and no complaints yet. So check all that stuff out, guys, and also Mobility WOD. Check them out. We appreciate what you're doing. Keep sending us questions in the form of iTunes reviews, and we'll knock them out. Big things ahead for Doc and Jock podcast. Big things for your performance. Keep listening, and always trying to prove that if you have a body, you are an athlete. Thanks, gang.